So we're here today. I'm Kelley T. Woods in Anacortes, Washington, and my guest is Scott Sandland. Now, I don't really think he needs a great introduction because if you're in the hypnotic community, you probably know who he is. But if for some reason you've missed out on that, well, he's just an awesome guy. And Scott has been a leader in our community for many years. I first met you, Scott, through hypnothoughts.com. And, I've thanked you personally in the past, but I want to reiterate that today and say that prior to you creating hypnothoughts.com and me finding it, I operated in isolation. I was up here in the northwest corner of the country and doing my own thing. But as many practitioners know it can be a lonely thing when you're a private practitioner. And so what you did was to create this open, inclusive forum for us to connect and get to know each other and to expand not only those relationships, but our perspectives of what we're doing. So thank you for that. And of course, you have many different facets to your skill set and what you've been doing. And one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you here on this Zoominar is your specialty in working with people who suffer from addictions. And so that's the topic of our talk today. And again, I appreciate you joining us. I know that you're really busy.
It's absolutely my pleasure. It really is. And again, sorry I was a couple minutes late. It was just, today's one of those back-to-back days of client after client, as many people on this, especially you, have gone through as well.
Yeah, I know how that goes, and so we value your contribution here today. I'm just curious, how did you end up in that kind of trajectory of ending up in the medical and dental application of hypnosis?
Yeah, so I got into hypnosis for pain control. And if you look at my career, kind of everything really does, start there and sort of rooted there. And then I was doing a lot with pain control with sports. And from there, I went into medical and mostly dental, actually, for many years, just because of, I was really confident in my ability to, impact and help people in acute and chronic pain scenarios. And so because I was able to do that, I felt really good going into a space where I thought, okay, there's a lot of referral opportunities, so I don't have to do a lot of marketing, which is not something I was historically good at. I like working with doctors. I like working off referrals where other people are sort of the coach and I'm the player, if that makes sense. And, with our clients, we're sort of the coach and they're the player, but having a situation where they're telling me what to do to some degree and then giving me kind of license to work within my area of specialty, I really like that model. And so it sort of ran away with itself. And then I did years of mostly dental, some medical, but mostly dental, working with a couple doctors and a handful of dentists. And shortly thereafter, I started working with a lot of people who were chemically dependent on opiates, post-surgical opiates. So someone slips on ice or breaks their leg or whatever it is, and so they get, or just has surgery for something that isn't painful, but just surgical suffering that generated a need for opiates. And from whatever the original cause was, these people were now chemically dependent on opiates. They were not junkies. They were just hooked on their pain meds and needed help getting off. And that was really where I started working with addiction. And I was helping people get out of pain and then saying, okay, now you need to deal with your opiate withdrawals. Go talk to somebody else, because that's not what I do. And a couple doctors really pushed me to start getting good at that. And they said, look, you've got momentum, you've got rapport, you've got all the things that we need. We need to get you good at this space because you're a potential asset. And that's sort of where it went. And then I did 15 years of working in drug rehab centers, where I was working with groups and one-on-ones. And all of that came because of my core, sort of skill set in pain control.
I love that history, and I resonate with that too. And
yeah.
Often I'll hear stories from members of our group that they got into the practice of hypnosis through their own personal experience. So did Did you have any pain experiences that you had to apply hypnosis for?
Quite a bit. I was a scholarship water polo player who
Oh,
was in a car accident where I ended up on pavement, and broken arms, both shoulders dislocated, sprained and strained, missing a bunch of skin, shoes flying off, kind of car accident. And it hurt a lot. It hurt a lot in a lot of different ways. So, when you talk about different types of pain, I experienced a lot of those different types, sort of in a symphony. And so finding ways to resolve that was a great challenge. And the amount of opiates I needed to take to be out of pain was an amount of opiates that would make me a non-functioning human. Just the way my tolerances work, and I'm not impacted by opiates well. So like what would normally be like an amount of Dilaudid that would knock somebody out, I can take, and maybe it'll make me high, but it definitely won't make me feel better. And so the amount they had to give me so that the pain would go away, just the way my tolerances work, would make me a useless human. So I found hypnosis was, after trying everything, I found hypnosis was the thing that worked more effectively for me than other stuff.
I love that. And of course, that's a great metaphor for working with clients, isn't it? That
Yeah.
they have different levels of response, and why it's so important to meet the person where they are and utilize what they bring to us too, that no one protocol or approach is going to be effective for everybody.
Right.
So, one of the questions that came up is, how do we as hypnosis practitioners, and when I'm just talking about that, I'm talking about people like myself who don't have other qualifications. I don't have an addiction counseling credentials. I don't, I don't have any medical licensing behind me.
Nor do I.
Oh, great, and that's wonderful to know, because you're doing awesome work, and so am I. And that it may not be required. It's not required.
Yeah.
And I like what Richard Nungard says. Sometimes hypnosis is a frontline approach, which is great to know too. But how do we assess what we can safely work with, and how we can work with? And I realize that's a blurry line too. But what are some guidelines that you go by, or that you could recommend for us?
Yeah, so I love working with this community of people dealing with addiction. And it is profoundly not for everybody, even people who really want to and have good hearts. This population of people have different requirements for working with them. So number one is just kind of easy stuff. I would never, ever, 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 ever work with somebody for addiction without a medical referral who I knew with 100% certainty had gone through a proper medical detox. I just wouldn't. The amount of complex biochemistry that's going on in addiction is significantly more important to pay attention to than in just about any other place, because you can accidentally do a lot of harm. An easy, kind of lazy example that's also, it's lazy and kind of melodramatic, is you could help someone to stop drinking and the detox can kill them. And people don't think about alcohol detox being deadly, but it is the most deadly detox of any drug. And so you can go, well, I'm just helping someone stop drinking. Whoa, that's a giant sentence to say. You also have to understand that the addicted brain is a brain that lies. So if you're the kind of person who needs to trust your clients and like feel good trusting them, you should not work with this population. It is my job to not trust the people when they're talking to me. I believe their feelings, but I do not believe their facts. So I'm sure they're having an emotional experience similar to what they're talking about. But I'm also highly confident that their objective assessment of reality is skewed. So it's not necessarily that they're lying. They could be lying, definitely can be lying. They often lie. They lie to the people who love them most. They lie to themselves. So it's not necessarily that they're lying, but it's that their ability to objectively measure reality is totally skewed. And so even if they're not high right now, their organization of facts from the past should not be trusted as facts. what we need to do is look at those as, okay, the feelings associated with those, the emotional process this person is going through, that's valid, and we need to address that without accepting the premise that we're talking about the truth. So it's a really interesting and complicated group of people because their biochemical needs are way outside the scope of our what we can do. And their ability to be forthright and honest with us is just not there. I would never, ever, ever see a drug addict client anywhere near my home. I would never want any of them to know where I live. If you work out of your home, you should just delete this entire possibility from your short-term career until you get an office. I would also say we can do our best work when we're working as part of a treatment team. And I love working with the teams. So I work with a bunch of drug rehab centers. I've worked with like 8 or 9 over the years. And I'll run a group and we'll do a group session. And then I'll do one-on-ones off that. And when I'm doing that, that means I can talk with case managers and clinical directors about what's going on and be part of a team that's providing holistic treatment options, not just, you know, what I can do is the only thing and the best thing. Because I don't know what the best thing is for any one individual.
I love that frame, Scott, and your cautionary words are well received by me, and I've experienced those even within my own personal circle of how addiction changes the brain and changes the thought processes and their own assessment of risk, for example. And,
Yeah.
you know, and when I think about the population of hypnosis practitioners and what drives us to be doing our work is to help people. It's very satisfying. You know, it makes us happy to make other people happy and well. And so, you know I have an inclination to see these people in this light of positive regard. I talked about that recently at HT Platinum. And yet to have that discretion is really important with working with this population. And I have had some clients who didn't present with an addiction, but it surfaced later in the session where when they felt safe to reveal that, wow, you know, this is, whether it's alcohol or some other substance abuse or some other addiction, then once we addressed the symptom that they came in with, then they felt free with that. And then that's the tricky part. How do we know, without having the breadth of knowledge that you do, how do we know when to refer that person out? What would be
as soon as the person's talking about drugs, right? Alcohol included, right? And
okay.
As soon as the person's talking about that, you need help. We are no longer qualified to act alone as soon as the person's talking about this. And just say, look, this is the kind of thing where my good intentions can backfire, and neither one of us gets to make this decision. We owe it to, you know, just ethics to get a licensed medical professional on the team as soon as that's in play. You just can't trust their assessment, like, oh, I've only done a little bit and I haven't done it in a while. No, they lie all the time, very effectively.
And the truth is that most people underestimate their own consumption of things like alcohol.
Yes.
Right.
And we just, it's one of those things where we just, like, one of the keys of addiction is violation of boundaries. And, you know, everyone talks about, like, where's your rock bottom, and finding a new rock bottom and a new rock bottom and things getting worse. It's all about just violating the boundary of rock bottom and having an even more severe rock bottom. And the addicted brain violates boundaries constantly. And so if you're going to work with this population, you need to have very strict boundaries, and then you need to stick to them when it's inconvenient and it's going to hurt the client's feelings. And you have to be absolutely comfortable telling a client no for something they really want and that might help them when they're crying. And they'll say, but I really want this. And then I'll say, great, so go do this. No, I need you to help me. I don't want to do that. That's what we do. That's how we help you. The client, an addicted client, does not get to pick their treatment regimen. That is a horrible, horrible, horrible idea. And they're like, well, I know me better than anybody, and I know what hasn't worked in the past. Shut up. No, we're not doing that. Like, I won't even entertain that as a premise. Doctors go to the doctor. We need someone outside of us to help us get better. And when the client says, I know best, we're just going to do it my way, in that population, it's a giant red flag. Yeah. And that's a person who's looking for an easy way out rather than doing the real work. And when you talk about addiction, it's about doing the real work.
I totally agree with you. And I think that, unfortunately, hypnosis often is perceived as being the easy way out to the general public. Yes. And so I have had people come to me, under the premises of stress relief. And then, I had a heroin addict, functioning young man, and he came for stress relief. And after a couple sessions, he revealed his addiction. And at that point, I did exactly what you said. And I said, no, you don't get to pick hypnosis for your perceived easy out. I'll be part of your team. And, when you're in a treatment program, I'm happy to be part of that. But, I think that takes great courage, and it takes recognition that we're not everything to everybody.
And it's not our job to be liked by these people. It's our job to help these people. And I mean, I had a guy do meth in my parking lot and then come in for his first session to stop smoking.
Wow. How did you know that he had done that?
I was looking right at him. and I mean, he told me he was coming for stop smoking, right? That's what he filled out on the paperwork and all this stuff. And he comes in here and I look at him and I was like, oh, let's talk about what's really going on. And he's like, yeah, so it's not just smoking, it's really smoking meth. And I was like, okay, well, when was the last time you smoked meth? And he was like 20 minutes ago in your parking lot. And I was like, right. So we're canceling this session. And we are not doing anything until we're talking to a doctor. And he's like, but I thought you were going to hypnotize me so I wouldn't need to do this anymore. I really need your help. I'm losing my job and my family hates me and I just need your help. And I was like, dude, you showed up to an appointment high. How committed are you actually to getting the help? We need you to do things that are uncomfortable. And it needs to start with you showing up sober. And I ended up helping that guy. We worked with a physician. We worked with a detox system, and he got better. But he didn't like the beginning of it, but that's okay. They'll say thank you later. And that is an important part of everyone watching this. If you're considering working with this group, you really need to be comfortable saying no to people who are begging, because they will beg and they will vilify their other treatment people. They'll say, well, no, those people are awful and you're the only person who can help me. And they'll play to your ego, and that's manipulation. And if that person is manipulating you into violating your boundaries, you're no longer in control and you've wasted an opportunity to help people. With great intentions, by the way. You're being a wonderful person, and they've just tweaked the relationship dynamic, and now they're driving instead of you. And that's not a way to help people in this case.
Yeah. And I appreciate so much that you're saying this, Scott. And so we also recognize that it's not just black or white, that if someone calls you for help in this arena, we don't necessarily have to say, no, there's no help for you. But this is where having local resources available and having those relationships with doctors, with psychotherapists. I have a handful of psychotherapists that we refer back and forth to each other in my town. We have a fantastic inpatient 30-day treatment center here on a local island that uses hypnosis. Yeah. Oh, how marvelous is that? So to cultivate these relationships, how do you suggest that members here access those people and introduce their services and create those relationships? What's the best way to do that?
It's honestly going to those rehabs and saying you're willing to do a group, and you'll run a group. And what I recommend doing, now we'll talk about how you're ready to do that and what that takes in a second, but assuming you're ready, you go to a rehab and you say, look, I want to run a process group with you guys. Here's my hourly rates. because they run process groups, all day, every day. And you say, I'll do a month for free, which is, a weekly group. So I'll do 4 for free to prove that I'm good. But if you like me, this is my rate. And then I'll do one-on-ones at that rate as well. And then they say yes or no or whatever they say, but then you do 4 group sessions. And that might be 6 people in the room, and there might be 60 people in the room. And you've got to be ready to do a group hypnosis session with people who are there against their will. And that's a really interesting thing. When you deal with drug rehab centers, about half the people in there don't want to be there. They're there because judges and people with guns are forcing them to be there, or prison. And they aren't quiet. They are rudely disruptive and in the way of the people who are there by their own volition. So it is not always, sometimes it's wonderful. Sometimes it's like the best supported, nurturing, great environment, but you have to be ready for the environments that are hostile and toxic. And you have to be a resource in a toxic environment. And that is, when you can do that, you can really help those people without getting burned out. And so you need to be ready to do that.
And that's a great point, without getting burned out. I appreciate that. And when you are providing that experience to these people, is this typically their first experience with something like hypnosis or mindfulness?
Yes, and many of them have been to a rehab that have done some sort of mindful meditation. And so that's a term that's pretty familiar for them. And you go, look, this is going to be very much like a guided meditation. It's a little bit different, but you talk to it in that way. But many of them have done something kind of similar. Also, hypnosis being dissociative in nature is something that a lot of drug addicts really enjoy. Just getting a bunch of people who've been going through withdrawals and detox, and withdrawals can take 2 months. It really can. You get out in the first couple days and you're out of detox, and now you're in your first 30 days of rehab, but you're still getting medically stabilized. So giving those people temporary relief from their symptoms gives them a sense of feeling in control again. And that's a really nice thing to be able to do for those people.
And we also know the power of shifting perspectives for helping people get insights and, a deeper awareness of, what really is driving an addiction. And are there any resources for hypnotists who might be wanting to set up a program like that, but don't really know? They need a little bit of direction on the content, because I can imagine if someone went on a first meeting with this group and decided to do a past life regression, that might not be the best choice.
Yeah, for a couple of reasons, by the way. So doing a group past life regression in a rehab would be a pretty impressive risk to take for your career. Number one, because if that rehab isn't aligned with that philosophy, or if all the clients aren't aligned with that philosophy, you've burned the opportunity. Number two, the opportunity for abreactions is higher. And you need to be doing work that is non-abreactive in your group sessions. And that to some people, depending on how you work, it doesn't impact my style as much, but it's just a stylistic thing. Some people have more abreactive processes, and you need to be clean there. You need to, if you're going to have abreactive processes in a one-on-one and you know how to handle it, that's reasonable. But you need to be doing work that's non-abreactive in your group session. So you need to be thinking about that side of things.
Yeah, right. I understand that. And, each group is different, but considering, when Karen Hand and I did our workshop recently at the winter conference, she has a 3-point recipe for that. And she says, know yourself, know your audience, and know your outcome. And I think that that's just such a simple rule. And if you're thinking about that audience, then there's certain sensitivities, right? And certain dynamics. And we also know that the person with the strongest emotional state sets the tone in a space like that. So even one person having that kind of, a reaction that you can't manage can trigger everybody else. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. Scott, I'm wondering, is there such a thing as an addictive personality? I hear this a lot from some of my clients, maybe they're coming in to change eating habits, for example.
Sure. So first of all, there is a genetic predisposition to addiction. You can map it on DNA. So there is actually a biological predisposition there. And that is kind of what people are talking about sometimes or talking around. That just is a thing. Now, that does not mean if you have that genetic marker, you will be an addict. It just increases the likelihood. That's fine. Like some people taste, when they have oregano, it tastes like soap, right? Like
cilantro.
Cilantro, yeah, thank you. I assumed it was oregano. I knew it was wrong. Yeah, cilantro, thank you. My brother-in-law has this. When like we're making food when he's in town, like you want to put some cilantro on a pizza you're making, he's like, he'll throw the pizza across the room. DNA is pretty complicated stuff. That's one of the factors, and addiction is correlated to a genetic marker. Now, there are a lot of people who have that and are not addicts, but there is something there. There's also a group of people that is just an all or nothing personality type, and that's a thing. So there are people who psychologically are just more of floodgates than kind of like a faucet, and those people can point those floodgates at healthy, successful things and be incredible. I've got some of my friends are that type, and I've got a buddy of mine who's one of those guys, and now he does marathons and triathlons and is constantly swimming from one island to another or whatever crazy adventures he's on, because that's what suits him. He doesn't like doing things a little bit. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a matter of making sure that the things you're doing a lot are things that are good to do a lot.
To even reframe that as a superpower.
Totally is.
Right. I love that. We have some questions in our chat room that are great. And so Amy asks Scott that in the frame of the client doesn't and shouldn't pick, their therapy, and within also that team approach, how do you collaborate with other influences that are anti-hypnotic in nature? She says, the issue with AA that always comes up in discussions is that they teach people that addiction is a disease that the person deals with for the rest of their life. And often rehab staffers can interfere negatively with healing by using language that really is not appropriate. That's a great question. Thank you, Amy.
There's so much in that question. Okay, so first of all, like I work within the 12-step and AA model. I also work outside of it. I do not think it is good or bad. It is a thing with pros and cons. It is a international free resource that has millions and millions of success stories, but that doesn't make it perfect. Okay, and there are some people that AA really, really works for, and there are some people that AA doesn't work for, just like diets, just like all sorts of things, exercise routines. Some people it clicks well. The nice thing about that one is it's free and it's everywhere. So the ubiquity of it is a resource. But how do I work with them? Well, here's an important thing, okay? God, I could just talk just about that question for like 2 hours.
Well, I don't have anything going on.
Yeah, I'll just have the clients one. So here's the thing. So the 12 steps, right, that everyone says are awful, right? What's the first of the 12 steps? Everyone gets this wrong, including case managers, by the way. When I go to rehabs, I ask them this question. What's the first step? And everyone says, you have to admit that you're powerless. And you go, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have to do that. You're like, yes, you do. It's admitting you're powerless. You have to admit you're powerless. No, you don't. This is really important to pay attention to the difference here. The first step of the 12 is we admitted that we were powerless and our lives had become unmanageable. It's all written in the past tense. All 12 are written in the past tense. I was afraid of the dark is not I am afraid of the dark. All 12 come from a place of success. And if you read the couple pages before the 12 steps, it starts with, we are 100 people who have successfully overcome our addictions. So it comes from a place of triumph. Now, this is to be fair, a lot of rehab centers don't study NLP, and so they don't care about verb tense, and they'll push that incorrectly. It is our job to work with that team and gently offer that kind of shift. And when you give them that paradigm shift, a lot of them really, really like it. And playing that game. Another reason why the rehabs push this idea of you have to commit to forever is because otherwise a lot of clients come in, they say, look, I'm just gonna, get clean for 120 days. And if I can do 120 days, that means I'm not an addict, and therefore I can start trying to use again. And then they end up living in their car. And so they're asking for a lifetime commitment for a couple actually really good reasons. Anybody who has questions about that side of things, I really recommend they read Russell Brandt's book. Russell Brandt is a wonderful example of how to reframe addiction and reframe the 12 steps in a way that's more in line with kind of the guru meditation vibes of the world. And also, if you think you're ready to work with addicts and kind of disrupt the addiction world because you watched a TED Talk on rats, I'm going to grab you by both shoulders and shake you. I know the studies of Rat Park 1 and Rat Park 2. They are super valid. They are super interesting and compelling, and they inform a lot about how to work with addicts. It is not a complete study. It is one study that is super interesting and has ramifications. But to say that all of the human condition and all of working with probably the most complex variables that we work with can be understood by one 20-minute TED Talk, really, just press pause, go in the other room and have someone punch you. And then come back and say, okay, what's going on?
I love that. I just ran into an article this morning on theatlantic.com. It's titled "How Brain Scientists Forgot That Brains Have Owners," and so they're talking about the rats specifically, and all the variations.
And Rat Park 1 and Rat Park 2, by the way, if you guys haven't seen that TED Talk, just look that up and it'll come up. And he says everything we know about addictions is wrong. And that sentence is incorrect. Some of what we know about addiction is incomplete. But he doesn't address chemical dependency. He doesn't address secondary addictions. He doesn't address secondary gains. He doesn't address a lot of things because the study isn't trying to address those things. The study's doing what it's doing, and it's great and has a lot of wonderful implications about giving people positive resources and assets. But we can't start with this giant institution that has helped millions of people isn't as good as my 45 minutes of research. Like, that's a really dangerous and arrogant, and whoever asked that question, I know that I'm not calling you arrogant. I don't even know what exactly your question was. But people who have the framework of, well, I took a 5-day hypnosis class, so I think I can do better than these people who put a career into understanding organic chemistry. Because organic chemistry is complicated. So I just want to say, like, we get to be a really awesome part of the team that really, really helps people. And they can't do our job just like we can't do theirs. So if we want to get the respect, we've got to give respect and to understand that no one can do all the things, and that's totally fine.
And I think that this frame of being part of a team is essential. And our tormentor, Michael Elner, drilled that into my brain early on in my career. Yes. And that people who feel better heal better, and yes. Doctors are people too. Yes. And so to approach any of these agencies, any of these providers with the frame that what I can do for you, rather than what the more egocentric position for I think a lot of hypnotists is, because they're scrambling to support a practice, is where can I get income and clients. But instead, if we approach them, what can I do for you? And that has opened so many doors for me. I don't work in the field of addiction, but certainly in cancer care. And when I approached my local cancer care center and offered to do a day of free, short, brief exchanges with their staff members, they gave me an exam room and they cycled people through for 15-minute experiences.
Yeah.
That was over 10 years ago, and I'm still getting referrals through those staff members that are still there. So, I think when we come from that frame, it's pretty amazing too. So there's another excellent question here from Tamalinda Scott. She asks, what are your thoughts on the client's skin in the game investment when they are not the one paying the fee? During hypnosis training, our instructor shared how when he had a contract with a local rehab center providing hypnosis to those clients in rehab who were not there on their own volition, the hypnosis had a really, really low success rate. He did not recommend working in this way.
Yeah, everything will have a low success rate when you're working with drug rehab centers because you have so many people who aren't there to get better. They're there to avoid prison. And so you have to factor that in, and you have to say, okay, if you're going for high success rates, avoid this arena altogether. It's not what we're doing here. The reason I have done so much in this space is because the wins are worth it to me. And I've just seen how much addiction destroys a whole family and a whole generation and a whole community. And so the more we can, it doesn't take very many people getting better for it to make a really profound difference. But it's even more than just the people aren't paying. It's the people don't care. And so what you really need to do is focus on the people who are there by their own volition, the people who are there, even if they're not financially paying, you can see the people who are invested. And if they are invested, we're good to go. And I will just not do one-on-ones with people who aren't invested. And the clinical directors know me and they know my rules and they know the way I play. And they'll say like, hey, do you want to do, Jane Smith wants a one-on-one with you. And, because the way it works is I do a group and then one-on-ones get booked through the clinical director and the case managers. And the case manager says, hey, we've got 3 people who want to do one-on-ones with you. And either a van drives all 3 of them here to my office, or I go there and I just do them, back to back in a room at the rehab. And I've done both over the years. And so a case manager will say, hey, Jane Smith or Steve Smith wants a one-on-one with you. And I'll say, do I want a one-on-one with them? And they know what that means. And they go, she's just counting days and just wants to do this so it's different and she's bored. And I'll be like, pass. I don't need to do that.
So you're reliant on their input then, because I was going to ask, how do you assess their motivation?
Yeah, I talk to their case managers. Case managers are good. In general, case managers are good at their job. Obviously some people suck at their job no matter what career path you're talking about. But in general, case managers have had real conversations with that client, and you go off them. Also, I want to just say this sentence. When you're working in rehabs, understand it is not their job to make the clients happy. It is their job to help get the clients better. And, my son asks for chocolate for breakfast every morning. And it would be super fun and easy just to give him chocolate for breakfast every morning. But I have to say no, because that's, my role. And it makes him disappointed and frustrated with me. And so part of it is you're talking to the person who's saying no to their requests, because they're asking for things that are unhealthy. And so you always want to give the case manager the benefit of the doubt and then follow up and ask them why they're making the decisions they're making, because you'll be surprised a lot when you start doing that there's more to it than you were thinking of.
Okay, that's great points. I have kind of an out there question for you.
Sure.
Experiencing hypnotic trance in the classic sense often and usually elicits certain chemicals, feel good stuff going on. If we are to teach people who have been doing this with drugs or alcohol, isn't this just exchanging one addiction for another?
It's giving them, ultimately all of the human experience can be measured in parts per million of hormones in your bloodstream. It doesn't seem like a very elegant or beautiful way to measure life, but somebody could. And if we're talking about the experience of euphoria or of peace or the kinds of things that drugs give that hypnosis can also provide, and to just let them see drugs aren't the only way to get this, stupid. And just go, other stuff can do this too. And they're like, well, drugs was the easiest. And you're like, nuh-uh, you had to steal stuff. You had to go to prison. My way's way easier. And,
Right.
and so we just do it that way. And so what you're doing is you're offering a compelling alternative. And I'm not worried about them becoming hypno junkies. I'm not worried about them becoming addicted to the hypnosis. I'm encouraged by their openness to, oh my gosh, drugs aren't the only way to get these feelings. These feelings exist.
And of course, that provides a platform for all kinds of amazing changes to occur. Someone had sent in an email question earlier asking, can addictions to sugar or TV, and I would also add like video games, be treated the same way, or intensity is very dangerous addictions like drugs or meds? So how would you compare those addictions?
Okay, so there's chemical dependency addictions, and then there's process addictions. So a process addiction is a video game, a process addiction is gambling, a process addiction is shopping, a process addiction is compelling obsessive behaviors. And so you look at those two things in a slightly different sense. And the reason I look at those differently is, I mean, both of them are coming down to serotonin and dopamine firing in their brain, yes, but one of them is also full of poison and the other isn't. So if you're talking about a video game is absolutely, it can be addictive. And some video games and social media, Facebook is designed to be addictive. It is weaponized to generate dopamine responses that addict you to the process and platform. Okay. But at no time does it inject poison into your blood. And that is a huge difference, because when you talk to your stop smoking clients and you talk about the number of chemicals in a cigarette, that was cleared by the FDA. Now imagine the stuff that the FDA says is horrible, and now put that inside your brain. And that's what drugs are, right? I mean, it's horrible chemicals that destroy and eat holes in your brain tissue and destroy your liver and a bunch of other things. And so we have to address the medical component of the chemistry, whereas in the process addiction, there can be behavioralistic, consequences and missing work and things like that. And there's a lot of work we can do there, but it's non-medical in nature. So separating process addiction versus substance abuse is a good way to look at that. The underlying behaviors of my life's not good enough as is, and this is an easy way to make my life suck less or seem to suck less. There's a lot of common patterns, but the fundamental biology is different.
And that's great to have that distinction. Thank you, because I think, especially if you think about when they stop that behavior, what's going to happen. And of course, that risk that you talked about for people who stop,
detox
alcohol
Amy Winehouse, right? Amy Winehouse, everyone talks about how she died. She died through withdrawals, right? One of the most talented celebrities we had in, a decade died through withdrawal symptoms. And so it kills people. And hers was alcohol withdrawal. Alcohol withdrawal is what killed Amy Winehouse. Now, granted, she was, her organic chemistry, was a dumpster fire, but in her compromised state, it was the alcohol withdrawal that killed
her. I really appreciate that. And I think if people get anything from this Zoominar, it's that point that you're making, to be so cautious and respectful of a client, to give them the help that they really need. Yeah. We often hear in our industry, there's even memes that say that a person has everything that they need within them to change or heal.
Sure.
What's your opinion about that? When we're working with someone who whether we're part of a team for a chemical addiction, or we're helping a smoker or a gambler, what's your feeling about that statement, that idea?
They don't. They don't. They have the ability to have those things. And some people don't have those things. So here's an easy example. And this is super lazy, but let's just go with it. Let's say I'm the only person in the world who can help that client. I know, but let's just go with it. Okay. So this person's problem, I'm the only person who can help them just because. And they only speak Mandarin and I don't. Mm-hmm. So just their ability to understand what I'm saying means that they don't have everything they need in order to get better. So do they have the possibility of being there? Yes. Is the human condition and the human experience amazing? Yes. I believe everybody's screwed up. Nobody breaks. Nobody is fundamentally broken, with very, very few exceptions of psychosis that are like permanent, Charles Manson kind of people, with the exception of like, a couple people ever. Nobody breaks, but we're all screwed up. And in some cases, I see clients who have everything they need, and it's just about helping them find it and build it up. Other people, those things are currently, but not permanently, but currently missing. They might not have any of the resources related to motivation. They may have completely atrophied away their ability to feel peace or joy. They might just not have those things right now. And so trying to elicit and utilize things that are currently missing is a problem. So you spend time really building up resources and calibrating how much of a certain thing they have. They might not have enough gas to get from where they are to where we want to get them. And so you need to help charge them up.
Right. No, I love it. And I agree with you. And I think that that's sometimes just kind of a blanket statement for us to.
Well, if you're working with someone for stop smoking, if you're working with somebody for, fear of public speaking, and they're a productive member of society, then it's a safe assumption. But when you're working with somebody who's been, doing heroin since they were 13, and they've been doing meth for the last 15 years, and they've been the victim of dozens of violent crimes, and they've seen murders, and they've been hit by the police, and they haven't talked to their family in years, and they live in their car. If you just go into that session saying, what this person needs is to just believe in themselves, you're setting everyone up for a real disappointment. And there's a lot of foundational resource building that needs to be done with that person. And that's a person I've seen, 50 times. And we can help that person. It's more than just helping them believe in themselves.
It's going to be more complex than that. Hypnotic resources are great, but there, as you pointed out, there's so many external ones too that we need to connect them with. What do you think about aversion techniques?
Motivation away from the big problem I have with aversion is there's a maximum distance where all of a sudden it doesn't work as well. So if we just say aversion techniques is something smells bad, right? Well, I can get far enough away that it doesn't smell bad anymore, but this doesn't get me to my success. We need to get me all the way from my point A to my point B, not just far enough away from my point B that things aren't as bad as they were. A lot of drugs taste terrible. A lot of drugs hurt. The implicit craving overcomes the pain and suffering. So you'll lose that arms race. It's just a bad fight to get into because there's already so much to be, there's so many sources of aversion and suffering in drugs that it didn't move the needle. This person, like I said, this person has lost contact with their children, and you think it's gross is going to work? No, they know it's gross. That's why they have shame. And by the way, shame and loneliness, pay attention to these two things. Shame and loneliness are the things that cause relapse. Shame and loneliness cause relapse. So we need to be solving for those things. And that's why they have 90 meetings in 90 days. The reason AA makes you go to 90 meetings in 90 days is to develop community and to get in front of the loneliness problem. So it's actually really brilliant that they do that. And it works sometimes.
Well, it is brilliant, and I think, I think of that a lot with many of my clients who come in, and at the core of their issue is a sense of isolation and loneliness, whether they have, an addiction or not. And back to that point about aversion, yeah, if it was helpful, then all of those public media announcements about how, drugs and smoking and alcohol destroy your body, destroy things, would be more effective than they really are. And
I talk to people who've sold their body for drugs, right? Lots of people, lots of men and women who have sold their body for drugs. And if you think you're going to come up with something that's a stronger aversion than that, I'd love to hear what you think it is, but it's just the wrong tool for the job.
now that's a very poignant thought. Thank you. And, more so than people who have chemical addictions, I found myself working with their family members,
Yeah.
and helping them with hypnosis to find the right way that they can deal with that family member that they love, and maybe making boundaries, or to come to a place of acceptance of what's happening. Because, we think about working systemically, this is really important. And, sometimes I work with young people whose parents are struggling with addiction, and to be able to give those young people some personal skills so that they can manage it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be to where it's actually, at an impact where it's destroying things on a huge level, but we know that it's insidious. It gets its little claws into a family, and it spreads out, it ripples out and touches everybody.
It's worth Googling a little bit on family systems theory, and just kind of looking at a few articles on what family systems theory is, because addiction is a family problem. Whether it's the family's fault or not, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it impacts the family, and it creates chaos that then the family has to incorporate chaos into their existence. And so now there's a fundamental, greater chaos than a normal, quote unquote, family that has to be accounted for. And so everyone, there's all these sort of echoes and ramifications of that initial chaos.
So, Scott, if you think about the idea that an addiction, let's talk about alcohol, has a progressive nature to it.
Yep.
What can we do if we have a client, say, I work with many women who come in and they're at a point in their life where kids have flown the nest and they have more free time. Maybe they're retired, maybe they're working in some capacity, but they're feeling this void, and maybe they're filling it in with alcohol. And they haven't gotten to that point where it's really impacting them, but they have an awareness that they want to change that. How can we help a person at that state, at that level?
Yeah, and that is a very reasonable thing, where someone comes in, they say, look, me and my spouse are having, wine with dinner every night, and we just want to cut back. Like, we just see that this could be a thing that we don't want to be a thing. So you're not talking about someone who's, drinking a bottle of vodka, hiding in the bathroom. We're talking about, a person who's just seeing this before it's a problem, or as it's becoming a problem. And one of the things that I really like as a linguistic ambiguity is the word vice. A lot of people say, what's your vice? Drinking's my vice, or gambling's my vice, or driving too fast is my vice, or whatever their vice is. I like to look at that not as Miami Vice, which is a cool, sexy, exciting thing. I look at it as vice president, as in distant second place. Nobody wants to be vice president, right? All these people all these politicians, none of them are hoping to be vice president.
Right.
One of them is going to settle on that. And alcohol is a vice. It is a distant second place. What you want is healthy relationships. What you'll settle for is to not be lonely. And drinking just helps me to not feel lonely, because I'm just not going to feel anything. Or what I want is to feel connected to my spouse and and all these things, but I'll settle for just having this because it's easy and it just works. Or I want to have an exciting life, but I'll settle for just not being stressed this evening and be distracted away from my job, or whatever that vice is in their story. You want to say, look, what I want you to do is, I don't want you to sacrifice alcohol. I want you to stop sacrificing whatever you're sacrificing to alcohol, and to shift the idea of sacrifice. Because they're like, I don't want to have to give it up. I'm like, no, 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 I'm not asking you to give up. I'm asking you to stop giving up and selling yourself short. And shifting that is, I think, a real easy way to get traction with those people.
That is, I love that. I'm going to start using that frame of it being a vice president and let them identify and start to embrace what's president, right?
Yep.
And that's marvelous. No, I live in Washington, as you know, and so medical marijuana was approved here years ago, and then it's been a couple of years now, at least, since recreational marijuana sales were
down here in California as well. Yeah.
Right, most of the West Coast and Canada now too, and so there's certainly and I don't know that this is a new thing or people are just more audible about it and they're more forthcoming and transparent about their use of it to de-stress. But I'm having more and more clients coming to me that are saying that this might be a problem in my life, and so. Do you have any particular tips that you could give me and some of the listeners on how to help these clients?
So I'll say this. First of all, as it relates to marijuana, the clinical studies on it are remarkable in that they're 50-50. Half the studies say marijuana is addictive, chemically addictive, and half the studies say it isn't. All of the studies, all within reason, say that it has the ability to be psychologically addictive. So is marijuana addictive? Psychologically, it totally can be for a person. Chemically, some say yes, some say no. Okay, we can, we'll call that open to interpretation at this time. But I'm not the one deciding if something's a problem. They are, right? So if a person comes to me and they say, hey, I was smoking a little pot after work and now I'm, thinking about smoking pot at work, or whatever the thing is that they're doing. By the way, as I'm saying that, I'm just imagining these sound bites getting cut out of context and being used against me.
I'll totally do that. That's just my.
There's just going to be like this highlight reel of me personifying different drug addicts and just played in a loop. So like when that client comes and says that something that wasn't a problem is becoming a problem, really what we want to look at is, okay, are you telling me that your life isn't good enough and you're just looking to escape? And all we need to do is improve your life a little bit or find other healthy ways to escape temporarily. And then this would be less of an issue. And if they say yes, then that's the game. So you say, okay, well, some people play golf and some people skydive and some people scuba dive and some people whatever, go for a run or learn how to bake. We just need to find a thing that gets you going. And if we can find that for you, then you don't need that vice. You don't need to just check out. Relaxing and checking out is a wonderful thing. There's a positive intent behind that in a lot of cases where someone says, I'm stressed and I'm overwhelmed and I need something that's going to help relieve that so I can be a happier person. That's a wonderful intention. We just need to find an intrinsic way of doing that rather than an extrinsic training wheels, right?
Yeah, and I think this is a skill set that every hypnotist should have, to be able to drill down to that need that they're trying to meet. And in that same topic, Leanne asked, how do we distinguish between excessive social drinking and alcoholism? Some of my clients have called themselves alcoholics when it sounds like excessive social drinking. At what point do we need to refer them on to a health professional for alcoholism?
Super tricky question. Perfect question. It's like, that's right there, like this rub. And really what it comes down to is, for me, the way I do it is, how many days has it been since your last drink? And how often do you go 3 days without a drink? If these people are going 5 days without a drink and they're binge drinking on the weekends, I'm not, but like they go 5 days with no alcohol and then binge drink on the weekend, 5 days with no alcohol, binge drink on the weekend, that kind of thing. I'm not worried about their chemical detox. It sounds like they've got a drinking problem. But I'm not worried about their detox. As soon as you're talking about a person who's drinking every day or most days, if they're drinking every or most day, that's the thing for me that goes, okay, boom. Now, that's also assuming all they're doing is alcohol. That might be all they're admitting to right now, but they might be doing other things in addition to that that they don't want to tell you yet. But that's a whole different piece. Assuming they're telling you the truth, the thing I'm paying attention to is what's the interval between drinks? How many days can they go in between? And if they can do 5 days in between drinks, then I'm not worried about the detox. Uh-oh, do we freeze? I'm seeing other people move, but I'm seeing Kelley frozen. Oh, fascinating. Hi, everyone.
Oh, okay. I came back, sorry.
Oh, yeah, we're back.
Yeah, my connection there took a little break. Okay. Yeah, and so I heard most of that, and I think the rest of people might have, but I like that distinction. And so just a series of questions that you ask a client that will kind of give an assessment for them also. And of course, we know that people don't arrive just in a vacuum. They've already thought about this stuff.
Right.
They've already gone online and asked themselves. They've done those surveys. Maybe other people have mentioned it to them. So all of these are already alerting to them that at the very least, there might be a dependency or and I've had clients that have a drink once a month and they want to stop. So it can be everywhere along that spectrum, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had a client come in to stop drinking. I was like, how much do you drink? And he said, 2-3 times a month. I was like, okay, are you getting drunk 2-3 times a month? He's like, oh, no, I haven't been drunk in a long time. I'm having one drink after dinner 2 or 3 times a month. I was like, oh, okay. And we talked about the realities of that, and he was sincere. He was like, yeah, I want to cut that out because why do it at all? And I was like, all right, great. And so we did. But it's that interval in between that is, and again, you also have to be careful because who knows if they're telling you the truth or not. And it is very fair to assume that they are not. Everybody lies, especially drug addicts.
And especially to themselves.
Yes.
So, and I think that this is really a power of hypnosis, is to get people to a level of authenticity and integrity with themselves so that they can, even if they're not airing it verbally to us, that they can really find that truth within themselves. And that can be a wonderful moving point. So, in my mind, I think that often hypnosis can be the catalyst. I've had clients who came to me to feel better because their lives weren't going well. And through even one single session, they were able to find the motivation to go and get help in other ways. So
absolutely,
that's a great application for it too. And if we look at ourselves as a conduit in that way, that might be a good frame too, where we don't have to try to take on that responsibility that isn't ours and shouldn't be ours.
Yes. Yeah, we are a member of the team. And I know some people want to vilify 12-step and AA, and I understand why. It's not supposed to be for everything, and it's not supposed to be for everybody. You don't have to believe in a higher power. You can be an atheist. There are certain AA groups that are designed specifically for that. There's all sorts of different things. We should not look at you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. We want to help the person get better, not pursue our agenda. Like I said, I work in and out of 12-step all the time. I don't apologize for it or pretend that it's a perfect thing, but it's got a lot of merit, and it's got a lot of studies that support it behind it, and it's got a lot of wonderful people within it that want to help, and that shouldn't be discounted. So nothing has to be perfect to be great.
And I agree with that, and I think that also maps across to the tendency within our field to denigrate psychology.
Right.
And, we're all in this together. And often it takes more than one modality to help with people and help a person. And I love it when I have a client who is receiving acupuncture. They have a talk therapist. They're going to a chiropractor, and they're doing all of these things, and they include hypnosis in their recipe for healing.
Yes.
So And, isn't it better for us not to feel isolated? I mean, just from a personal point of view, I'm healthier when I know that I've got all of you out there supporting me. Plus, I have the psychotherapists in town and the dream workers and, the addiction counselors, everybody. And so for me, it's just a much healthier model in general.
Yeah, there is no us versus them. We're all in this for the same reason. Every one of us has chosen a career path that's dedicated to helping people that we can help, and that's good enough for me.
For me too, Scott. And you've given some great insights and perspectives here today. If someone really wants to delve further into the area of work and be like you, what would you suggest where do you suggest they go for additional training or resources?
Sure. So if you want somebody who's going to say things that are a lot like what I say, you want to look at Richard Nongard and Will Horton. If you want somebody who says things that are in conflict with what I just said, you want to go to Melissa Tiers. I have great relationships with all three of them. All of them are smart and valid. Melissa and I respectfully disagree on a couple little things on addiction. She is more anti-12-step than I am, and that's okay. I am much more open and playing much more of a team sport in that regard. But Nongard and Will Horton have stuff that's more directly aligned with what I just said. So those would be.
And they both have a lot of formal experience in that field too.
Yeah, they'll both openly admit it's no secret that both Will and Richard have both been sober for longer than I've been working with people in addiction. So they have a ton of experience, and they're both smart guys.
That's great. And Melissa is Melissa, genius in her own right. I love that you give us different flavors to sample. Because
it's not about making sure everyone agrees with me. It's about finding resources that are going to help you help people.
Yeah, we have different palettes, so that's awesome. Well, this has been marvelous. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your lovely energy with us here today. And I think that it's going to make an impact. And this video will be shown in a replay in my group, and I'll send you a copy of it too. And of course, you're welcome to use it in any way that you want. If you want to cut out those sound bites of your choice, you certainly can. But thank you so much, Scott, and I hope the rest of your day is fantastic. And thank you, members of Hypnotic Women, for joining us here today on this episode of Visiting with a Wonderful Hypnotic Brother. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody. And thank you, Kelley.